Hey guys, another edition of Quarantine with Coaches. Today I got a real special guest, one of my favorite Twitter followers, and a really great coach, Matt Drinkall, tight ends coach at Army. How you doing today, Coach?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you can't talk to, I think, an Army coach without talking about the Army-Navy game. I know as a young guy, as a kid, my best friend's dad is playing at Army. So that Army-Navy day, he liked to lace up the shoes, go play some pickup football with us, and then he'd treat us to one of the best meals of all time, and as long as we promised to root for Army, of course, right, and beat Navy. Could you describe maybe your first Army-Navy game this year?
Yeah, so I have a very, very cool experience with the Army-Navy game. So in 2018, when I was the head coach at Kansas Wesleyan, we got beat in the semifinals of the playoffs. And I was sad but I had already known Coach Munkin out here and Brett Davis, the offensive coordinator, and some other guys on staff. So I was sad when we got beat for about 5 minutes, because then I was like, I'm going to Army-Navy next weekend. So in 2018, I got to go out to Philadelphia as a fan and got to see it all and experience it all, ate breakfast over where the Phillies play, and then went and partied at the Barstool deal, and did experience the whole event as a fan. And then Army won, and I went to the Army hotel after the game and got to see everybody, so it was awesome. And then turn right back around and go into it as a preparation for this year. Just there are two sporting events that I have attended in my career, in my life, that I can say are, no matter what, whether you like the sport or know anything about it, you have to go to, which is the Army-Navy game and the Indy 500. I don't know anything about racing, but just the event and what that is and the atmosphere. And the biggest misconception I can tell everybody, this was my own personal experience, was I thought Army-Navy hated each other. I thought it was and really what it is, when you don't understand it until you get to the game and you realize that all of America is watching. All the elite people that run the country and run the planet are there. And it's not that you hate the other school, it's that you want to win that game to say that you're the best of the best. You're the best of the elite people, and it's such a point of pride. So just that experience, you see the president, meet the president this past year, and the Secretary of the Army, and Secretary of Defense, and Secretary of State. And these are the people that history books are written by the decisions that these people make, and you're meeting them. So I think that's it's a one-of-a-kind environment where no matter who wins the game, we all win as Americans.
Awesome. Hey, before you arrived at Army this year, you already mentioned you were a successful head coach at Kansas Wesleyan in a very explosive spread offense, right? And now you're a position coach in a triple option offense. Can you talk about maybe that transition back into a position coach role, and certainly into an offense that is totally different than maybe what you were doing as a coordinator and head coach?
Yeah, the assistant part was easy, because when I became a head coach, it took me about 3 weeks. And then I called every head coach I worked for before and apologized for being such a bad assistant. So I had a much better understanding. I was in an off-field role to get hired back here at Army before I moved on to the field as a tight ends coach. So I kind of knew, I thought I was able to handle that transition. It was a lot easier on me personally and professionally because of my experience. I don't know if I could have done it right at 24 years old or whatever. So probably at 28. The offense is as different as you could ever get in. When I say I didn't go under center, man, I didn't go under center to kill the clock, to kneel out a game, ever. And one of those deals where anyone who knows me, I have this terrible problem of I speak in hyperboles. So I always say best, always, never, worst. It's one extreme or the other. And as a result, when you do that, your opinions start to dwell in your brain and become fact, your own opinion. So it has been the best thing that has happened in my professional career was getting here and then being the dumbest guy in the room in every single meeting we had. I'm you're relearning all of it, not the plays. Anybody can draw plays on a board, but the way that you go through the why you do everything. Why do you call midline versus veer? When you get in the gun in an offense like this versus when you go under center, how to use formations. we really don't run as much option as people think. We just run the ball often, and we do as good of a job. We're very similar to an NFL style offense as far as unbalanced formations and condensed formations and how to use some of those things to gain an advantage. So it has been drastically different, but very, very good for my development.
Awesome. And with regards to leadership, West Point is known for producing, you already touched on a little bit, some of the best leaders in this country's history. Is there something you've learned or had affirmed in your time there about leadership?
Yeah, there's three things. When you hear the term like leadership, it's hard to quantify. You know what I mean? It's hard to kind of lasso that whole term in. There's really been three things that I think make being here really unique, or getting here. So number one, in recruiting, I think that the recruits we get, there's two commonalities with them. One is that good people are really pushing them to come here. Because if you talk hey, Army I think about when I was 17 years old. If you talk to two 17-year-old kids are talking about West Point, I don't know how fired up they get initially. They can get a recruiting deal from Miami and go live at the beach, or USC and go live at the other beach, and get more excited about that. But if you have a 17-year-old talk to a 35-year-old about West Point and what if I could go back in time, if I could do it again, those guys become very influential. So I think there's really good people that influence the recruits. The biggest misconception is that you have to be like a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to do well here. And that's not really it. It's you need to be smart enough, but you got to be a tough son of a gun who's disciplined, who's competitive, that works hard. So it's not like every kid, probably just, obviously I'm not an overly bright person, but I can't get into I didn't go to Yale or Harvard, but I would imagine you got to be pretty top end sharp just to survive in those environments. And that's not really what it is here. It's really it's a white collar prestige, but with a blue collar mentality. So that's the biggest misconception. And then the third part about the leadership is I've learned, and me and my wife love this the most about here. It proves without a shadow of a doubt you are an average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Once you get onto campus, every person you meet is a badass at everything. You meet a girl on the gymnastics team, you meet a guy who plays rugby here, you meet some girl who's an athletic trainer, and then you go meet some guy who's a wrestler. Every person here is that kind of mentality, very intrinsically motivated, very tough, very selfless, team-oriented, pushes to be successful. That's by far the coolest part about it. And it was Mike Beatty explained it to me the best. If you say I went to Harvard, people just know you're smart. If you say, hey, I played football at LSU, people know you're good at football. Once you say I went to West Point, I played football at West Point, they learn a lot about you from that sentence as far as there's a certain level of education, intelligence, work ethic, commitment, team. They learn a lot about you, stereotype you in a good way, in an accurate way. So those are the three, I guess, biggest components. It's blue collar, tough people, and you're surrounded by people that are like that.
Hey, moving back to when you were head coach, one thing I've heard you speak on before is head coach management. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, man. So I did it way different, drastically different than anyone I know of. And I get anything from oh, I think that's a great idea to this guy's a complete idiot. You must have I get it all over the board. I mean, people think it's crazy. So I'm going to share a couple opinions that, again, I think are facts. There's very few Joe Paternos and Kirk Ferences. If you take a head coaching job, you're probably going to get fired. That's what's going to happen to you at some point. It's very hard to build what a place like Whitewater had. Those aren't the norms. Those are the outliers. So if you're going to take a head coaching job and be in control of your life and a team full of kids' lives and your whole staff and their wives and their kids and all their lives, do it your way, because you're going to get fired either way, probably. I kind of went into that with that mentality. And I did have the fortune of doing it at a lower level where in the reality of it, no one cares. Like, it's not Notre Dame, USC on TV, and if you get 28 first downs instead of 30, people are complaining and saying you need to get fired. So you can try things out, and if they work, great. And if not, they don't. You know, the thing I will tell you is, like, I can give two really good pieces of advice about things I did that ended up in hindsight being really good choices. One was compensation. Okay, most people, you can't determine the amount of money that they make, but every great employee wants to be compensated as much as possible. So, like, you guys are all, like, everybody everywhere is on fixed contracts. So what are ways as a manager that I can compensate my employees as best as they can? So I talked about time a bunch, work environment, and culture. So I worked really, really hard ensuring that we had a culture of positivity. I didn't want, like, any negative. I wanted to be like, when you're around our football program, win or lose games, who gives a rat's ass. Take that aside. That's not going to define how we view success. That'll be a byproduct of us doing things successful the rest of the time. So we wanted to be really positive. Time management, like, working hard versus working long, you have to make that decision as a manager and get behind it. We did not come into the office before 10 a.m. ever. We practiced and got done at 6:30 and then immediately went home. You would be surprised how much work you can get done when you have to. But I wanted my staff to be able to sleep in and rest and have a work-life balance and look at stuff stupid on the internet and on Twitter and play a video game if they wanted to, or hang out with their kids and their family, or take their wives out on dates so they don't get in trouble and strain their marriage. Well, as a result, I got the payback on the back end of when my guys were at work. Dude, those guys were fired up to be at work. And we were flying around, very energetic. It feeds into the kids. Synergy is kind of one of those lame business buzzwords that everybody uses. I guess, I don't know, maybe it's not lame, maybe it's right. But that was really a huge piece of it. And the other piece of advice I could give you is, like, if you're going to be a head coach, you can't take what I did somewhere else and then put it in there at that place. To be a really good head coach, in my opinion, you need to pull on your experience as a staff and be really different experiences and figure out which of one of them applies, which one of them don't apply so much that I need to probably be going the other way with it. And then you have to build a staff full of two things, in my opinion: loyal, good dudes that are good problem solvers. If you can do those two things, like, the plays you run don't really matter. So, like, if I can tell you this or give a piece of advice, there's a formula to winning. You have to have players, like sitting in a head coaching chair. You have to have players that are good enough. Now, you recruit them, you develop them, however you want to do it. If you're a high school coach, there's no difference. You're still recruiting. You're getting kids to not focus on baseball and not focus on basketball, or you're recruiting them in the traditional sense, and you're developing them when they're there. So you get players that are good enough. You get them in a culture that's going to be positive, that builds the things that you want. Maybe it's sleek and fast like a Ferrari, or maybe it's like an old beat up truck that you can depend on. Whatever, that you do stuff different in North Dakota and Wisconsin than you would in Southern Houston and Miami. Like, it's you build a culture that fits. So it's players that are good enough into a culture that you want, which is really just words for behaviors, a set of behaviors you want, and then do things that they can execute. So to me, you need to have that's where, like, flexibility, problem solving as a coach. Like, man, there's going to be some years inside zone goes and some years outside zone goes, and the other years the plays look like crap. And it's probably dependent on human resources. That goes back to that. But I think it's very easy to fall in the habit of, like, our players aren't good enough, and we can blame players, when in reality, there's only one team that has the best players. There's only one of those in the whole country. And the reality is, most people have players that are good enough, but you screw up somewhere else. You might have a crap culture, maybe you got a good culture, maybe you got good players, good culture, but then you go and try to do everything there is under the sun, and you don't execute well on game day. So I went about a lot of things a lot of different ways as far as recruiting and management, but that's really some of the, without staying on too long, those are really some of the key points.
Awesome. And before I let you go, let's go rapid fire. These are some personal questions I've gathered from following you on Twitter. If you had an offense that can emulate any offense in the history of football, professionally or college, who would it be? Who would you emulate?
Man, I don't know. If it's just scheme, I don't know. I've always had, because I was like a two-back pro style guy growing up. There's always been something about the 2011, 2012 Chip Kelly Oregon offenses. That looked cool. I don't know, maybe the uniforms helped or whatever, but just it was one back and it was RPOs and it was just fast paced, and that seemed cool to me. So I'm gonna have to probably go with that one.
Good one. Hey, what's been your go-to quarantine meal?
I'm not gonna lie, I've been making a lot of Philly cheesesteak burgers because I ran out of hoagies. So that's been helping out a bunch, and a lot of SpaghettiOs and meatballs. But if there was a Panda Express open near me, that would be essential personnel. I would write a letter to my senator.
Hey, what series are you watching currently on maybe Netflix or one of those other platforms?
So I go back and I watch. I haven't been watching like series so much, other than Tiger King. I mean, Tiger King, do like 6 of these podcasts in a row of just Tiger King. That is the most unbelievable, captivating entertainment.
It's the pinnacle of television. It's the pinnacle of television.
It is unbelievable. And then the memes and stuff that happens that coincide with it to supplement it on the internet, unparalleled. But I have been going back and watching a lot of old movies at night to kind of fall asleep to that I really like. You know, your Tombstones, your Big Lebowski's, Cinderella Man, stuff like that. So my wife keeps trying to get me into Ozark. I watched the first episode. Seems a lot like Breaking Bad, which was it's like emotionally draining. I'm just not ready to jump in yet.
I would recommend Ozark. I just finished it. It's really good. Give it a
try. Okay. So you're through season 3?
I finished it in basically a week. As soon as I left this desk where I'm filming this at, I started Ozarks for about 5 days straight, and this weekend I finished.
Oh man, that's big time.
That's binge. You know what I mean?
My wife pinned me down with a lot of the Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings so far, so that's going good.
Happy wife, happy life, man. Hey, you can see it sort of in the background. I've noticed. I told you this earlier. Probably my least favorite thing about you is you're a Blackhawks fan. I'm St. Louis born and raised. I'm a Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues fan. But I'll ask it anyway.
Those losers had never even won a Stanley Cup game until the year they won it.
Yeah.
Get a hold of Jeremy McDowell, the OC at SEMO. He is a big Blues fan too, and every time they win, which has been a lot recently, I get a lot of not even like words with the text, just a gift.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, if hockey season comes back, now we're a 2-year Stanley Cup champion, which I'm not saying I want one way or the other, but anyway, I'll ask you anyway because you're a big Blackhawks fan. You're the best Chicago Blackhawk, or maybe your favorite Chicago Blackhawk of all time.
Who? So, I think, and the old hockey buffs will get pretty mad about this, but it's not. And it's not a recency bias. But Patrick Kane is the best American-born player in the history of the game, and I think that's going to overpower Hull and Nikita, and even Taze as it goes on. My favorite player, and this is I almost thought my marriage was doomed because the first present I ever bought my wife was a Panarin jersey, one of those T-shirt jerseys. And I love this guy, and I was super hyped because he was 19 years old and just tearing it up. I bought her this jersey, and 3 days later, was sitting at breakfast, and he got traded. While I was sitting there eating breakfast, and she thought someone in my family died, and I'm talking about it right now, getting upset. That was fanboy, caught off guard, devastated. But I'm gonna go with Patrick Kane. But boy, did I like Panarin, and I'm a big Andrew Shaw guy. Andrew Shaw is a badass. If I could have played hockey, I feel like I would have played like Andrew Shaw.
I can't stand Andrew Shaw. I hope he doesn't see this. I suspect he won't. But
that's why he's awesome, because he's one of those dudes that if he's on your team, you love him, and if he's not, you despise him.
Hey, I've seen you include this in presentation clinic talks before, so I assume you're a big Office fan. If possible, your favorite episode of The Office?
I know it, hands down, and it's kind of a sappy, lame answer, but it's Casino Night. So Casino Night, for you Office people, it's the night where, it's directed by Michael Scott, one of the few episodes that he directed. It was awesome, very well done, but it was like the culmination of Pam and Jim coming to a head. Finally, Jim does something about it, but a very serious, intimate relationship that took so long to build, paralleled with the same story of Michael Scott, who chases anybody and anything, ends up accidentally bringing two girls to the same party. And one is just such you're cheering for both, but one is a very serious, intimate thing, and the other thing is a complete disaster, poorly thought out. I thought the two stories paralleled each other very well. So that's one I can always go back to. And it's just, and aside from the storyline, it's a fun episode to watch.
Man, I feel like we got to have another episode of Quarantine with Coaches with you. We'll talk Office and we'll talk fullbacks, and I feel like between the two of us, that's a 2-hour podcast between fullback play and The Office.
There's nothing better than fullbacks.
Yeah, nothing better. Make fullbacks great again. Coach, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on Quarantine with Coaches.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.